And then, of course, how did the 50 million live? Well, 46, 47 million of them are on food stamps. And that right now, in the city of New York, let's say, which is a case that's been documented, it's $31 per person per week. It's $120 to $130 per person per month. Varies a little bit according to where you are. So if it's $31 per person per week, the accounting is that each meal is going to cost about $1.50 if you're on food stamps. The Republican Party in particular wants to gut it. The Democratic Party wants to give it the death of 1,000 cuts, but the Republicans want to come after it with a chainsaw, right? You look at the Ryan plan, you look at the Republican study group. Let's look at Ron Paul, because he's the most extreme of all the austerity ghouls. Ron Paul's Restore America program, which is the first time he has committed himself to actual numbers on a page. It's on his website. I urge you to look at it, Restore America. It is a cut between 62 and 63% in the food stamp budget. In 1 year, he takes you right down from the full amount now, I think it's about 80 billion, down to two-thirds less, or just about. And that means that each meal will be 58 cents. You'll be able to spend 58 cents per meal on food stamps in the future. And that's supposed to be good enough for 50 million Americans. That is a recipe for rickets, pellagra, scurvy, for cognitive impairment because of lack of protein in infancy. This is barbaric cruelty. This is, of course, it's also a loser. Ron Paul should factor into his economic plan the extra expense of learning Chinese to learn how to take orders, because that's who's going to be giving the orders. Any country that thinks that they can go to low wages, driving down the level of wages and driving down the level of essentially destroying a social safety net, will be overtaken and destroyed by the Chinese. It's just as obvious as the nose on your face. It's a losing program. The United States is traditionally a high-wage country. Anybody who wants to depart from that is essentially taking the leap into the dark. So I would just wonder how many people would die. What kind of genocide will we have in the United States, starting with members of that group of 50 million paupers who have no jobs, no medical care. If their food stamps are taken away, how many will die? Hundreds of thousands? Millions? I guess we're soon going to find out if people like Ron Paul get their way. And the Austrian school is able to carry out their plans. But I think seems to me this is the principal threat of depopulation and genocide right now. There are other forms. It comes through wars. It comes through other means. But in terms of the main line, right, the core, the principal thrust of genocidal politics inside the United States right now, this is essentially saying let's take the genocidal policies of impoverishment and immiseration that we've had in the Third World, and let's visit these on the United States. And it's coming from Wall Street. It comes from Peter Peterson of the Peter Peterson Institute of International Economics in Massachusetts Avenue, but it's also coming from the wonderful libertarian wing of the Republican Party.
I wanted to ask you something because you brought up the elite don't like technology. Right?
I hate it.
Why? First of all, I want to get your definition on what a technocrat is, and then why do you think that they're putting what they're calling "quote unquote" technocrats in power in Europe?
Monty.
Well, I'd like to get your take on the technocratic issue.
But what was the beginning of this?
Well, you were just talking about how the elites hate technology, but you see right now with the banking collapses in Europe, especially in Greece, that they're openly. I mean, these are headlines in Time magazine now. That they're putting in technocrats. So what is the purpose of that, and what is your definition of a technocrat? Because most people think, technological democrat, when in fact it's a bureaucrat just given power.
It's a banker.
Sure.
But look, the oligarchs, the elitists hate technology, once again, because technology, science, and rationality are inherently a challenge to this idea that oligarchs should rule and other people should kowtow to the oligarchs. But let's get actually specific and look at how this creeps into the United States in our time. once again. You look at the U.S., you look at the infrastructure. The infrastructure, a lot of it goes back to the 1930s, right? The principal dams, the Hoover Dam, the Bonneville Dam, the Triborough Bridge, the Golden Gate, things like this. These are products of the Works Progress Administration or the Public Works Administration, either Harry Hopkins or Harold Ickes in the New Deal. If you're out in the heartland, you'll find that the public library, the school, generally WPA, 1935, things like this, right? This is the infrastructure of the United States. Maybe even more crucially, you look at the canal system. You look at the Sioux Canal that gets you from Lake Superior into Lake Michigan, which is the busiest canal in the world because it carries all the iron ore from the upper Great Lakes towards what used to be the steel mills. You look at the canal systems along the Tennessee and Ohio rivers, carry a lot of coal, a lot of power generators that would not work if those canal locks finally break down, which they're now threatening to do. So you see the Howard Street Tunnel in Baltimore, the entire East Coast traffic of the U.S. rail system. If you want to go from Boston, New York, Philadelphia, to get through Baltimore, to get to Washington and Norfolk and all the points south, you got to go through the Howard Street Tunnel in Baltimore. It's more than 100 years old. It's a one-track tunnel. It's not even double-tracked. It only goes one way. And the roof is so low that you can't get a double-stacked container car out of there. So right now there's a big thing. There's a new Panamax coming up, right? There's a new, bigger, maximum Panama Canal size ship which is coming forward. The only ports in the eastern United States that can accommodate this are Norfolk, Virginia, and Baltimore. Baltimore has a place where you can have a dock and you got deep water, you can bring a big ship, but it's got to have the double-stacked containers. And we have a crisis now about the Howard Street Tunnel. If the Howard Street Tunnel were ever closed and you wanted to go from Washington, D.C. to New York City, you'd have to go to Cleveland and then Albany and then down the Hudson River to New York City. Now, this is a pathetic, shameful decay of infrastructure, most of it from the 19th century, not even from the 20th century. Now, any fool should be able to see that this needs to be rebuilt. It doesn't take any particular insight. The U.S. deficit in infrastructure is certainly $10 trillion. It may be as much as $15 trillion. It's very hard to get accurate figures, but go out on the interstate highway system. It was a great thing, the greatest road building project since the Romans, and now it's a lunar landscape. Right? It looks like the Verdun battlefield with all the shell holes and pockmarks and craters. This has got to be rebuilt. There's also the question of rail transport, right, in a more general sense. Now, this is where technology meets the masses. And if you were going to have a stimulus, and if you want to get out of a depression and have a recovery program, which is the main issue, this is the way to do it. Now, there was some of this built into the Obama stimulus and the Obama supplemental, but not enough, nowhere near enough, and it was not handled in the correct way. So basically now we're sitting here. We have all kinds of projects. We have the California Fast Rail, right, from Los Angeles to San Francisco. The governor wants to build it. The reactionary Republicans don't want to build it. We need another tunnel under the East River in New York, right, between Manhattan and New Jersey. This time the money is there for most of it, but the reactionary Governor Christie of New Jersey doesn't want to build it. Governor Christie, of course, the guy who looks like Hermann Goering and thinks like Hermann Goering of the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s. You look at similar plans to build fast rail in Florida. Governor Scott doesn't want to build those. Scott Walker in Wisconsin doesn't want to build fast rail in Wisconsin. And if you listen to National Public Radio, you'll find that the left-oligarchs, right, they're really not very enthusiastic about this either. Because, of course, they're oligarchs, too. They don't like the idea of technology. They believe in zero growth, and they're hostile to technology. They're all true believers on the altar of global warming and what have you. Of course, the irony is that this would be high-speed rail, maglev rail. This would actually be ecologically just what they should want, but for some reason they don't want it, because the ultimate secret is that they hate technology. But if you look at this, it looks like practically the entirety of the Republican Party and significant parts of the Democrats, although not quite as many on their side, are absolutely hostile to the idea of introducing technology into the lives of people. Suppose if you've been commuting, as a lot of people do, from Trenton, New Jersey to Philadelphia, or whatever it is. If you could make that trip in half the time, or a third of the time, this would change your life. This would be progress for you, and your outlook, I think, would correspondingly change. You might also be less inclined to kowtow to the Hermann Goering there in Trenton, who runs your state, or whoever else it is, right? Or the similarly for Governor Cuomo or Governor Brown, right, who are not much better on any of these issues. But the idea is the realization of science is what the oligarchy wishes to block. And right now, you can be sure that any infrastructure project that's done using public money or government authority in any way will immediately be sabotaged by reactionary Republicans and their shock troops, or these proto-fascist libertarians that you have running all over the place. So the idea of the oligarchy hating technology is not an abstract thing. This is a concrete political issue in the United States right now today. So this is the idea with technology. Now, a technocrat, the technocrat, this is, I think, a word which is designed to fool people, right? This is not a serious concept, right? We can just see where it came from. I remember in Italy, where I was working as a reporter in the late 1970s, early 1980s, there were calls for a government of technocrats. And what, of course, it means is Malthusian bureaucrats, Malthusian bankers, Malthusian officials of any kind that have no political support, right? They're not from a party. They're above the parties. And that, of course, means that they feel free to carry out the austerity dictate, right? The brutal, savage, genocidal demand for austerity against the people becomes their stock in trade.